Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 24th of July, comes to you from London, where we have a new British Prime Minister in place of Boris Johnson. So it'll be interesting to see how UK markets react to that. Well, effectively, it's already in the price because that was what it was expected. But if you look at the dollar climbing higher, looking bullish again on all three time frames. So dollar strength returning to be the theme, and with this long-term trend, that's always going to be the thing that it will come back to that theme of dollar strength. And conversely, if we look at the euro dollar is weak, and on all three time frames, we're seeing that weakness kicking in. We will see bouts of positiveness on the short term. This is the 60-minute chart, but the daily and the weekly charts will take a lot more to move into bullish territory. So for now, the overriding trends are bearish for the euro. Dollar against the yen is down slightly this morning, but it's still bullish on the short-term chart, but not the medium and long-term charts. And sterling is weaker against the dollar on all three time frames with downside targets now. 119 is the sort of target, so it'll be interesting to see sterling break that 120 level, but that's what the charts are suggesting. Of course, we've got levels below this on the long-term chart back to parity for sterling. So the market is pricing in some fear element that a no deal would bring. And looking to the euro, we're seeing sterling actually rising a little bit. So the euro is just struggling a little bit there. And against the Swiss franc, we're still pretty low at 122.67 this morning. Against the Aussie dollar sitting at 178, so a bit of a recovery going on there. Bitcoin sitting at $9,650, so we've broken that $10,000 level, looking more and more like we might just have hit some resistance here. The lagging line back in the cloud, and just seeing the sort of breakdown, potentially a double top here. So one to watch. We don't have any clear downside targets on the longer term chart. We do on the short term chart, some 10% lower if we move lower than the low we just saw this morning. So if we've had a little bit of a rebound. If we move lower, we activate that selling thrust, giving us a new downside target. Looking at the S&P 500 index, we were up last night, so just edging higher all the time, the new all-time high, of course. And the Nasdaq also similarly was up as well. So if we look at the Nasdaq here, we see that we were just rising, not enough to really break to levels higher than what we saw last week at the high, but still pushing forward. Nasdaq stocks, the major ones, the bellwethers, actually sold off quite heavily last night in after-hours trading on the announcements of an investigation by the Justice Department in the US. So we should expect to see some quite big falls in Nasdaq stocks today. And if we look at the Russell 2000 index, still struggling to break higher, so the breadth is still a concern there. The S&P future is down slightly this morning, and the Nasdaq E-mini is down 0.4%, reflecting that DOJ investigation. So we will see some turbulence at the opening in the Nasdaq stocks. Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook certainly all look set to be nervous at the opening. The FTSE 100 is down 0.25% this morning. A little bit of political uncertainty still in the UK, what the new PM is going to do, and that is probably having a little bit of effect on sentiment. Midcaps actually rising this morning, so that's looking a bit better. And the DAX is little changed, although we are just in positive short-term territory here. Work to do to break into long-term bullish territory, but the medium term is still pretty good. And the CAC Quarante is up 0.9%. This still the European market is nudging new highs, so looking pretty good there. Tokyo was up 0.4%, the Hang Seng was up 0.5%, and the Chinese market up 0.8%, not enough to change the bearish nature there. The Sensex in India down 0.6%, so just falling away there, and the Aussie market bucking the trend up 0.7%, probably the best looking market in the region at the moment. Looking at Brent Crude, we're sitting at $64, just holding on to the gains. No resolution to the Iraq crisis, of course, but we are short-term bullish above the cloud there in that recovery mode. And WTI, much the same picture. US nat gas sitting at $2.30, still very much in the doldrums. No real change there. We've just been teetering along at this level now for weeks on end. Gold sitting at $1,424, still just a little bit weak on the short-term chart, but still very strong on the medium and long-term charts. And silver actually holding the bullish trend, so just slightly different from gold there. And US 10-year yields recovering to 2.86%, so 2.086%, I should say. So we are seeing a little bit of recovery there. And if we look at the upside targets, we've got targets here of 209, 210, 212. So it does suggest we're just starting to see maybe we're through the worst on interest rates, of course, awaiting the Fed reaction. Looking at stocks now, individual stocks. We saw the tech actually perform quite well last night. We had Apple up there, and we had Microsoft also rising. But the interesting thing is that we are set to see this change today, as I said, with that investigation. But Coke was the best performer on their very impressive results, and they've jumped to a new high there, so looking very good. Lots of upside targets on Coke. They've been in places for since 2014. So we've got 5 upside targets. Very unusual to see that many targets. That's bullish for Coke, and the relative just not quite turning yet, but we are seeing very strong looking chart there with multiple upside targets of 6, 7, 13, and some of these earlier targets now being met, of course, because they were given a long time ago, 5 years ago. Taking a look at the worst performer, Travelers Inc., they were down 1.5%. Taking a look at the Nasdaq now, the best performers, Hasbro were up 9.9%, and that's looking very strong as a chart as well. Looking good there, outperforming the market by over 15% this year so far. Take a look at the other end of the scale. We had Insight Corporation down 4%. Not many fallers here yesterday, quite interesting, so it was mostly up for Nasdaq stocks. The Aussie market overnight, the best performer was Eclipse. They're up 7%. Probably just recovering through the cloud there on the medium term. We've got good upside targets. The relative is dire, underperforming the market by 50% this year so far. If we look at the other end of the scale, we've got Regis Resources down 11% and Euclid Resources down 10%. So these charts still holding on, but those are big falls yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see how they recover after that. Looking at the Nifty 50 now, Z Entertainment was the best performer in India, up 4%. Remember that the Sensex was down. Here's the live pricing coming in from Yahoo. The Sensex was mostly down, so there weren't many upside stocks. On the downside, we had Adani Ports. They were down quite significantly. Not enough to break their trend, but they have underperformed the market by 17% so far this year. Vedanta, we see we're at 4% down, and that is looking more and more bearish as a chart, underperforming by 32% so far this year with downside targets. So keep an eye on that. Looking to Europe now, if we look at the UK market first of all, we've got ITV, they're out strong results this morning. Love Island helping them significantly. Not enough to arrest the share price underperformance. Here we see the relative, some 25% underperformance so far this year. ITV falling, but this morning they have surprised to the upside. Informa, they're up 4.8%, and that's a better looking chart, breaking to new highs and looking quite strong there, outperforming the market by 15% this year. Looking at the downside, we've got Croda International, they're down 4%, Rio Tinto down 3.5%, BHP, Anglo American. So we're seeing resource stocks in the FTSE down this morning, although the charts still look pretty good. If we look at the FTSE 250, the mid-caps in the UK, we've got Viva Energy, they're up 4%, and then on the downside, we've got Aston Martin Lagonda Group, they're down a massive 22%. They have had a very rough ride since their debut on the market a couple of years ago, so really struggling there for Aston Martin. Just Group also down a further 7%. That chart not looking good either. Looking into Europe now, the majors in Europe, the top 50 Euro stocks. We've got the Brewhouse Bev, they're looking pretty strong on that short term, making that transition to medium term. Outperformed the market so far by 25% this year. Iberdrola in Spain, the Spanish Generator, they're looking pretty strong, and that chart looking really good. And then if we look at the downside, ING Group down, BMW giving up yesterday's games. We've got Societe Generale, BNP Paribas, European banks being hit this morning by the looks of things, Santander, and the like. So we are just seeing that sell off there in the banks. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.